Before he was a Hollywood icon, Burt Lancaster was flying through the air as a circus acrobat, strong, graceful, and fearless. Born Burton Stephen Lancaster in 1913 New York City, he came from a working-class world where dreams were often just that, dreams. But Lancaster was different. With a body sculpted by hard work and a spirit driven by ambition, he leapt from the gritty streets of East Harlem to the shining stages of Hollywood. Audiences knew him for his daring stunts, his intense presence, and that signature charm that made him one of the most bankable stars of the 1940s and 50s. But behind the camera, there was another story, one far more private. While he was dazzling crowds on screen, Burt was keeping a secret in the shadows, one that Hollywood wasn't ready for. In an era where being gay could destroy a career overnight, Lancaster lived a life of calculated silence, love, and risk. Now, decades later, the truth about his private life, and the men he quietly loved, is finally coming to light. This is the side of Burt Lancaster the studios didn't want you to see. Hollywood couldn't ignore him for long. With piercing eyes, a towering frame, and raw magnetism, Burt Lancaster was impossible to miss. His big break came in 1946 with The Killers, where he portrayed a haunted ex-boxer marked for death. The role didn't just launch his career, it solidified him as a powerful new force in American cinema. What made Lancaster different wasn't just his looks or physicality, it was his depth. He had the rare ability to blend rugged masculinity with genuine emotional complexity. Whether he was brooding in a noir thriller, riding tall in a western, or confronting social taboos in hard-hitting dramas, Lancaster brought gravity and grace to every role. By the 1950s, he wasn't just following Hollywood's rules, he was rewriting them. He co-founded his own production company, Hecht Hill Lancaster, alongside Harold Hecht and James Hill. It was a bold move for an actor at the time, giving him creative control and the freedom to tell the stories he believed in, even if they ruffled feathers in the industry. He pursued, which allowed him to make movies that were more socially aware and artistically ambitious than most studio movies. Notable movies from this time include Marty, 1955, which won the Academy Award for Best Picture and was praised for its honest portrayal of everyday life and love, and Separate Tables, 1958, which dealt with complicated human emotions and societal issues. Lancaster's hard work behind the scenes showed that he cared about both his job and the progress of film as a serious art form. His work life Lancaster won a lot of praise, including 2 Academy Awards. His first Oscar was for his powerful performance as an ex-convict trying to rebuild his life in Elmer Gantry, 1960. His performance was electrifying, combining charm, menace, and moral ambiguity, showing off his incredible range as an actor. He won a second Oscar for his role in Birdman of Alcatraz, 1962, in which he played a murderer who became a respected prison reformer and bird expert. Showed how good Lancaster was at playing truly flawed, complicated people with empathy and depth, making the characters more than just stereotypes. This went beyond his acting achievements on screen. Burt Lancaster was also known for his strong morals and activism. He fought hard for civil rights and social justice, and he often used his fame to back causes he believed in, even though Hollywood was wary of getting involved in politics at the time. It was clear that Lancaster was an actor who was ready to speak out against racism and injustice. He fought against unfairness and injustice by supporting unions and artists' rights. This showed a strong commitment to fairness and human dignity, which won him respect from audiences, peers, and the community as a whole. Lancaster continued to have an effect on movies well into the 1970s and 1980s, when he continued to play challenging and different roles. Some of his best later roles were in The Swimmer, 1968, a strange and intensely psychological movie that has become a cult classic, and Atlantic City, 1980, which won him an Oscar. Another nomination for an Academy Award showed how well he could play older characters with depth and emotion. Even as Hollywood changed, Lancaster adapted and stayed relevant, constantly pushing the limits of his art. Burt Lancaster was married 3 times and had 5 children. Each relationship and family chapter showed a different stage of his personal growth and challenges. His complicated personal life often ran parallel to his intense and famous career. Hollywood showed the real side of a star whose public image was based on charm and physical prowess. His first marriage was to June Ernst, a woman whose life was deeply connected with circus and aerial act. June Ernst wasn't your average wife, she was a trapeze dancer herself. She came from a family with a long history of aerial artists. Her mother was a famous female aerialist who was a big deal in the circus world at a time when women performers were breaking new ground. Ernst had taken over this bravery and skill, and before she married Lancaster, she was already a well-known and skilled acrobat. After Burt and June got married, he became very involved with her circus family, acting with them and improving his own acrobatic skills. This time in Lancaster's life shaped his physicality and athleticism, which became defining traits of his later screen presence. However, despite their shared background and performances, the marriage was not meant to last, and the pair split up in the late 1930s. Officially divorced isn't clear. At the time, news reports said it happened in 1940, but later biographers looking through records and accounts have suggested dates going as late as 1946. This difference in dates has made it harder to follow Lancaster's later relationships and marriage to his second wife. His second marriage was to Norma Anderson, which began because of unusual circumstances during World War II. Anderson, 1917 to 1988, started out as a stenographer and then moved on to. She filled in for an actress who got sick in a USO show for American troops stationed in Italy. It was during this time that fate intervened. On her way to town from the airport, Norma saw Burt Lancaster in the crowd and was immediately struck by his good looks and commanding presence. She was so interested that she reportedly asked a nearby officer, "Who is that good-looking officer, and is he married?" The police officer saw a chance and set them up on a blind date that same night. Their meeting was the. Lancaster's life began a long and important chapter when she married in 1946, starting what would become a complicated and politically active marriage. Norma was deeply involved in political and social causes, turning her passion into activism. Their bare home had a room full of printing presses and materials for mass mailings, which showed how committed Norma was to the League of Women Voters, an organization whose mission was to educate and empower voters, especially women, to take part in democracy. Norma was a lifelong member of the NAACP, and she and Burt both cared deeply about civil rights. In fact, they held a fundraiser for Martin Luther King Jr. and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference before the important March on Washington in 1963, showing how committed they were to social justice at a very important time in American history. Burt and Norma had 5 children together. Bill Lancaster, who went on to become an actor and director, had a son named James Lancaster. Sue Lancaster, who went on, was Joanna Lancaster. To work as a movie director, and Sigel said Sheila Lancaster's family seemed publicly active and supportive on the outside, but their marriage was full of problems. Lancaster's demanding work and personal problems made their relationship difficult. By 1966, they were no longer together, and Lancaster's second marriage ended in 1969, at the same time that their divorce was finalized. There were ups and downs in Burt Lancaster's friendship with hairdresser Jackie Bone, who worked on the set of the movie. Lancaster's most important work in the late 1960s and early 1970s was The Professionals. Their partnership was rough and intense. One famous incident involved Bone breaking a wine bottle over Lancaster's head at a dinner party with famous people from the business, like director Sidney Pollack and actor Peter Falk. This showed how passionate but often troubled their relationship was. Eventually, their relationship ended when Jackie Bone became religious. Lancaster, a man of. They allegedly couldn't find a way to reconcile their different spiritual paths, which led to their breakup. Burt Lancaster's third and final marriage happened much later in life, when he married Susan Martin in September 1990. This marriage was very different from his first two, as it was much quieter and less closely watched by the public. It lasted until his death in 1994, giving Lancaster company in his last years. Susan Martin was his partner when Lancaster was having health problems and thinking about a long and happy marriage. An impressive job in the last few years of his life. Burt Lancaster, who was once Hollywood's epitome of masculine bravado, is said to have told close friends about a shocking and deeply personal part of his past. his secret relationships with some of the most famous and out gay men of his time. At a time when being gay was not only illegal but also could ruin a career, Lancaster had to navigate a complicated web of affection, shared vulnerability, and the glittering facade of the golden age of Hollywood. Cary Grant was one of Lancaster's lovers. Grant was one of the most beautiful and well-trained actors of his time, and Lancaster was smitten by his groomed charm, sharp wit, and mysterious smile. The two met at an industry event in the late 1940s. They were both stars but moved in different movie circles. Grant, who had lived with actor Randolph Scott for years in what many later called a romantic relationship, kept up a carefully crafted image of sophistication and straight appeal. Lancaster described their link as electric, but cautious about a relationship that grew over secret weekends in remote beach houses along the Pacific Coast Highway. Grant was very private, and he was afraid of being found out, even with someone as brave as Lancaster. Their relationship was emotionally rich, but it ended quickly, with Grant retreating deeper into his fortress of discretion, unwilling to risk his carefully crafted persona. Many people were shocked when Lancaster said he had a short but strange relationship with J. Edgar Hoover, the notorious FBI chief who wielded. Hoover had a lot of political and cultural power in the middle of the 20th century. He was never married and was said to have had a long-term relationship with his assistant. Even though Clyde Tolson wasn't an actor, he had close links to Hollywood because he had a lot of power over how law enforcement and morality were portrayed in the media. Lancaster remembered meeting Hoover through common friends at a fancy charity gala in Washington, D.C. They weren't romantically involved, but their relationship was tense and secretive. Longchamp. Lancaster had a very unsettling connection with Hoover, who was desperate for closeness but terrified of his own reflection. This connection gave Lancaster a unique look into the mind of one of the most mysterious men in American political history. Rock Hudson, the perfect leading man, tall, good-looking, and famous, became one of Lancaster's most emotionally intense relationships. They met on a movie set in the early 1950s, and their affair happened during the height of Hudson's fame. Hudson was constantly in fear because he was being watched over by studio officials. He was afraid of being found out, a fear that came true sadly when he died of AIDS in 1985 and made everyone face the truth he had been hiding for decades. Lancaster remembered Hudson as a kind person with the body of a gladiator who wanted love but felt like they could never get it. They spent a lot of time together on long road trips through the desert, away from the paparazzi, where they could breathe freely, if only for a weekend. Lancaster respected Hudson's need for privacy, and their relationship ended not because they didn't love each other anymore, but because permanence was impossible in a world that demanded denial. The most surprising name on Lancaster's list was Ricky Nelson, the teen idol and clean-cut TV star from The Adventures of AZ and Harriet. Nelson, who was almost 20 years younger than Lancaster, reportedly had a short and troubled affair with the older actor in the early 1960s, when Lancaster was already a famous actor and Nelson was still trying to become an adult artist. The relationship, though short-lived, was. Nelson saw Lancaster as both a mentor and a protector. Lancaster was aware of the imbalance, though, and ended the relationship gently, thinking that Ricky needed time to find his own identity in both his personal and professional life. He remembered Nelson with great affection, calling him the boy who sang like a breeze and kissed with the hunger of someone who had never been allowed to want. Finally, there was Marlon Brando, who Lancaster thought was the most complicated and brilliant person on the list. Brando was everything Lancaster wasn't. Lancaster remembers that they had a crazy, impulsive, and openly rebellious relationship. They met at a politically charged Hollywood event in the late 1950s, and the chemistry between them was instant, raw, and irrepressible. Brando, who was known for being sexually fluid and defying norms, would Lancaster with intellectual arguments, provocative challenges, and a sensuality that was difficult to resist. Their relationship was a mess, driven by ego, artistic rivalry, and a desire to be together. To physically and emotionally dominate each other. Lancaster called Brando, "the only man I ever met who could make me feel completely undone just by looking at me." Their relationship went on and off for a few years, ending only when the pressure of secrecy and their clashing personalities got too much to handle. Each of these relationships, which were kept from the public, painted a very different picture of Burt Lancaster than the one shown on screen. Beneath the image of the heroic swashbuckler and rugged leading man was a man who had. It was only later in life that Lancaster revealed these names. He wasn't trying to make a splash, he just wanted to be free from decades of hiding and pretending about a truth that defined him as much as any movie role. Lancaster died at 4:50 a.m. in his Century City, Los Angeles, apartment after having his third heart attack. On October 20, 1994, his body was cremated and his ashes were spread under a big oak tree in Westwood Memorial Park in Westwood Village, California. There is a small square ground plaque there with the words, Burt Lancaster 1913 to 1994, that marks the spot. Because he asked for no memorial or funeral service, there was none.